Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Turn that music down a little bit. I'm going to leave it a little higher than normal because I think it could stand to be a little higher than normal. One of my favorite Baroque pieces, which actually contains a favorite Baroque piece, which is suitable for New Year's Eve. It's a song called The Night Watchman by Heinrich Ignaz Franz von Bieber. In the middle of one of his instrumental works, he wrote this incredible song to the accompaniment of pizzicato strings that is quite advanced for the Baroque era, and a very pleasant song indeed. At any rate, today we're going to, I suppose, graduate from our Christmas series that we've been doing. Hope you had a great Christmas, got everything you wanted. We're about to celebrate New Year's. And in the spirit of New Year's, I'm going to talk about a topic that is about new ways of handling what we know that I think are still falling on deaf ears in many places in our world. I'm going to title this one The Mystery of Mysteries, the Origin of Godless and Satanic Cults. And we'll be touching on the theme of institutionalized tyranny during this, which is something that I think we are all recognizing that we are experiencing right now. Before I go any further, I want to introduce the work of AI art behind me and tell you what the theme was, how it all came about. I'm going to let you see the whole thing by hopefully moving me to the back so you can see the whole picture. Interesting story behind this picture. So I set out, I gave it the instruction to show me Beelzebub and Mother Goose. Let's see. Teaching catechism to zombie children. Interestingly enough, it would not let me complete this request with a word in it. They wouldn't say what. They just said, you can't complete this due to a restriction of words that we have. I finally realized that it was children it didn't like in the picture, yet obviously we have zombie children in the picture. So I'm quite pleased with what I got. I actually had to give this one 2 rounds. Round 1 was with a CGI character finish, a la Disney cartoon, and then I layered that with a dark dystopian finish that gave you the beloved representations of Beelzebub and Mother Goose. I'm not sure which is which actually now, but I think it pretty well captures the topic of the day. Especially this one with the hand up to the ear, listening for the message of maybe the mother goddess here, whose message was going off into the clouds and hardly anywhere near her ear. Meanwhile, all these little zombie children are trying to figure out what their parents are up to. Very, very, very vivid representation of what I'm going to talk to you about today. Okay, so what do I mean? Let's move this back so you can see my beautiful face again. Sorry. Vanity, thy name is, well, Rob Trump today. Okay, most of you have probably heard of mystery cults. Some of the more famous ones were the Eleusinian mysteries of Athens. There were mysteries associated with the cult of Isis and Osiris. There were mysteries associated with many Hindu and other cults. There were mysteries associated with the cult of the Vestal Virgins and the Sibylline books. of Roman prophecy. Many, many mysteries hidden in our histories, some of which are described, other of which, another good example is the mysteries of the cult of the Druids, of the ancient Celts, of which we only have a vague references to in mostly the writings of Julius Caesar, who was the one who wiped out the stronghold of the Druids on Anglesey Island. Very interesting period of history we won't talk about in detail, but just to remind you and show you that there are many mysteries that are still being unraveled, some of which have a representation in our folklore, in our literature, some of which are the mysteries behind lone statues, like the statues of Easter Island, the Moai of Easter Island, which we now know are not just heads, they're actually whole bodies. If you dig down deep enough, you'll find that they have an entire body, and they've been covered up to the extent that all that is to be seen of most of them is the heads, which belies the idea that they were created only 500 or 600 years ago by unknown culture which has vanished. Well, the culture that created them has vanished, but it's much more unknown than that, because the Moai, in fact, are an art form, a way of drawing a human form, which was also found at Göbekli Tepe, very similar, and in other ancient sites in South America and other parts of the world. So there's a lot of mysteries in our culture. And there are more recent mysteries that disguise things like secret organizations. One of which people know a lot about is the Templars. One of which people suspect a lot about is an organization called the Illuminati. Organizations like the Masonic Order. Organizations like the Zionist movement, which actually isn't a priori about Jews. It's about an idea of being chosen ones. And the Zionist cult was actually formed in England, of all places. Well, maybe there and in Germany, and had really almost nothing to do with the people who call themselves Jews, except for the fact that it was based upon the Old Testament, which is a scripture that the people of the Jewish faith claim as their exclusive holy testimony, despite the fact that a lot of it is borrowed, redacted, removed from earlier traditions of the Sumerians, culture which has completely vanished now. Remnants of it are still evident in the cultures that remain of Persia. Not much remaining there. There's been a lot of mysteries destroyed there, and mysteries still being destroyed there. New religions, in fact, a lot of their effort is to destroy vestiges of old mysteries that are not comfortable to their new cult. And a lot of what we're seeing nowadays is, in fact, folks trying to destroy culture. This is what cults do. They destroy culture and install their own culture, their own bias, their own way of viewing things. And there's often several layers of that. There's one layer that is what they're trying to install in the average person. And there's deeper layers that are what they install in their leadership to keep them loyal, to keep them on program. And I think you're starting to see the shape of this discussion right now. We have, in essence, active today, a cult that has this multi-layer. There's the mystery layer that's not so mysterious, actually, at the top of globalist multi-billionaires and top influencers around the world who have this idea that they need to save the world from humanity. And their idea is that humanity is a negative force that doesn't know what's good for itself and can't manage itself and is going to self-destruct unless they take it into hand and control it, manipulate it, mold it into humanity as they see perfection. And this has been essentially what all these organizations have been trying to do for a long, long, long time. And I'm going to talk to you about how that happens, why it happens, and how you don't really need to be as worried about it as you think you do. Okay, so where did all this mystery stuff come from? What's the origin of it? As I've told you before, it's because we have been in the seventh day of creation. Now, this seventh day was not, as the Bible says, it wasn't the day that God rested because everything was perfect. Everybody knows everything's not perfect now. If you think that, you must be cuckoo, right? You must be among the least intelligent, the most indoctrinated people, still believing, biblical literalism. Despite the fact that you should know that the Bible's been translated multiple times, very freely, in fact, in its translation to English, the King James Version. Now, I'm not dissing the King James Version because the people that did that translation actually were members of a secret organization, a cult, that thought they were going to make the world a better place by giving an English version of the Bible that would lead humanity toward what they thought was perfection. And that's basically what all elite cults have tried to do. In their own way, they think they know better than the rank and file of humanity. They invent a mythology to spread to the masses. Oh, you just have to say you believe in Jesus and you're going to be saved. And all your sins will be forgiven. If you just say you believe in Jesus and you come to church every day and you make donations to the church and you do everything the Pope tells you and see, this is how they suck you in. And there's good to it and there's bad to it. And their motives generally start out fairly noble. But what happens? Well, on the seventh day of creation, God was not here. This is what I tell you. What I told you in the series about the first no L. No L, no God. That's a joke. It's a joke from long ago from folks in France who understood what was really going on and shared a little bit of the mysteries, the real mysteries, for future mystics to discover and laugh at. And that's when you can actually find the really good stuff that's true in all the holy books and stuff like that, is you dig past all the stuff that is like magic mumbo jumbo, you got to do it this way or else, and you find the humor, because the humor is what was put there by real prophets. Real prophets were prophets because they were souls that were sent with a message. And they used that message the way that they were intended to. They weren't forced to do that. They were given a message and they got to choose how to deliver it, how to go about their ministry. And sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes the messenger was shot before they got the message out. Sometimes the message got out so well that they shot the reputation of the messenger and turned it into Orthodox Christianity or Catholicism, even worse. This is just how things work in this seventh day of creation. Now, some might conclude that that's a really bad thing. And from one point of view, it is. It is tyranny. It's bad for folks not to tell you the truth, to hide the truth, to disguise the truth. And they are committing a karmic sin of information tyranny. And that has been going on for as long as humans, as long as any souls have been exchanging messages. And that goes back to even before creation started. Before creation, before physical universes, space and time existed, souls were consciousness, pure consciousness, interacting with each other without any filters, without any barriers, without any laws. It was a pretty messy time because basically everything you knew about everybody else had to be gleaned from the spiritual energies of their minds. And if those spiritual energies were loving and supporting and open and honest, you got to like folks and trust them. However, you had no way of knowing if though that was the case. And there were very good liars then too, and fakers, and credit for others takers. All sorts of the bad sins that we know are not very good things to do to others. Happening then. It was happening with spiritual energies, not with any real messages. It was a very confusing time. And this is why all of creation had to happen, to make a system that works better, to make that mystery cult of energy communication into something that was less liable to get garbled. It's taken a long, long time. And basically souls taught themselves science in the process, taught them the laws of science, how to do a scientific experiment, how to do a scientific design and test it thoroughly, especially how to carefully design and test something that was a social experiment, a social engineering project, which, since souls are social things, consciousness is social. It would not exist, we would not think, we would not have any reason to think if there were not other souls around, doing their own thinking, doing their own thing, and us having to either work with them on common goals or work against them for things that we didn't like. So this is the source of both cooperation and conflict, both of which grow out of the social aspect of consciousness. Anyone who tells you consciousness is a purely rational, logical thing that does not involve emotion, does not involve ego, is a fool, is an idiot, is a liar. And I don't mind telling you, Buddhists, that a lot of the stuff that you spread is pure, unadulterated bullshit. Okay, I mean, this is another of the mystery cults, because the real Buddha didn't teach half the stuff that they attribute to Buddha, just like the real Christ, who's come many times, in fact, didn't teach the bullshit that many think of as the core message of Christianity. The core message of Christianity is the message I am telling you, that the real Christ have been telling you ever since Christ started coming in human form. And even before that, when the Christs were in other forms, one of which is the great centaur Chiron, whose story is mostly true from the mythology. There's a lot of good to be gleaned from that. Interesting that he had this best buddy, Hercules, who he instructed in the ways of being better people. This is where the myth of Gilgamesh intersects with Hercules. Pretty much all the hero myths of humanity are of that kind of a form. Some previous alpha creature handing on the baton of alphaness, of being a chosen one or species, onto a new version of humanity. And this is basically what's behind all mysteries. That we are all individual souls, all growing and learning at our own way, pace, and in our own way, with our own personality, our own strengths, our own weaknesses, our own illusions, all our own aspirations, our own idea of what perfection is, and learning how to achieve reasonable visions of our future that match our talents and our abilities, that are consistent with living in a social situation with other souls. Okay, so this is a system that does not reward narcissism. It doesn't reward people for having absurd illusions of who they are, what they are, and thinking that, well, because I believe I'm a potato, I need to have everybody else call me my potato pronouns. Or else. This is tyranny. This is the kind of tyranny, in fact, that the leaders of these cults started practicing once the real God disappeared. Now, how did that disappearance happen? Well, so God has been incarnating himself for a long time, along with most of his children, playing this fun game called reality in different universes, different dimensions. I talked a lot about the two universes that started it. The two universes of the Big Bang are the ones we're most familiar with. But there are, in fact, other universes. How did those other universes come into being? They came into being through the spiritual efforts, both good and bad, of other souls. And this is how the game of souls work. Some of these universes are physical, like the universes of the Big Bang, the universe and the anti-universe. They have rules, the rules of chemistry and physics, rules that you cannot break easily, because that's why they're rules. That's why physical universes are physical universes and not other kinds of universes, because the other universes are largely spiritual. They don't have those rules. They don't have all of them. The God of those universes gets to pick and choose what rules they want. If they want a universe to follow, to be able to maybe come up with better versions of one of the real physical universes, then they better follow the same rules and have the same starting points. And there are starting points all over the spectrum that is the prime timeline. The latest save game, if you will, of the overall divine plan. What determines those big save games? Those are determined by the incarnation of key characters in the game. Now, obviously, God, the first soul, is one of the key characters, but not one of the only ones. There are a number of souls involved in this game who are key characters in their own way. Karma is one of them. God's favorite daughter, Karma. When she has a life and completes a life and accomplishes certain measures in her incarnations, then there are things that happen karmically. When the male demiurge, Lucifer, who started out as the embodiment of the universe, has an incarnation and hits certain goals, certain missions, that is another starting point that's very useful. The same with Lilith, who started out as the master of the embodiment of the anti-universe. And although she has a feminine name, and she's considered the divine feminine, the female demiurge, at the time of her creation, there was no sex. So you really need to stop. As you listen to me, stop thinking about everything in terms of, oh, this sounds so sexist. Sex did not exist. Sex was actually a tool invented to help this whole thing come to a successful conclusion. Because we are about to finish one of the major timestamps of this whole game. We're about to finish day 7 of creation. Now, these days were not day long. They weren't any fixed length of time. It's a way of thinking about these major steps, these major save game points in creation, and giving sort of a context for the rules that govern them. And the rules that govern this game have evolved to the point where these main characters all have a part to play, all have to get to a certain spot to finish the game, to get to the next save game point so we can start the next day of creation. It has not been easy to get all of these old gods on the same page. But it's been worth it, because that's what had to happen to prove without a shadow of a doubt that the system of reincarnation and karma works to govern souls. That these virtual realities that are universes are a better way for souls to grow and learn and become all that they can be than existence in the original universe of pure thought. That was the original universe that God found himself the first soul in. Now, there may be other multiverses, but that is the original universe. That is the multiverse, the parent of all of the other universes. And it still is the superset of all of the other universes of our creation. And again, you can, metaphysicists are, well, what about outside that? What about before? And we're not talking about that. Just like most people don't talk about what's going on outside this universe we're in. Oh, well, you can't see that, so we can't talk about it. Or, people don't want to talk about what goes on inside black holes, because there's an event horizon and we can't see inside that. So, and it's all just conjecture from that point. So it's not really science. And so we're just not going to talk about it. Okay, I'm kind of throwing a little fun at materialist scientists. This is how these bozos think. Just because I can't see it, because I can't touch it, and it hasn't touched me, then it doesn't exist. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but that is not true. Just because you have not experienced something, just because you don't know something, just because you can't deduce it from your book learning and your personal experience, does not mean it doesn't exist. Similarly, just because you've come to a set of conclusions based on your experience and your book learning doesn't mean that that is the ultimate truth. Now, you're asking, well, Rob, how do you know you're telling me the ultimate truth? I don't. In fact, I know that there's probably truths outside of my ability to perceive, outside of my perspective. And the moment I run across one, I evaluate my perspective and see if I can fit it into it. If it's a reasonable proposition, I don't integrate the experiences of folks who are just trying to get famous, get likes, shares, and subscribes so that they can start their guru consultancy business and get people to send them money and make them rich for telling them happy little lies that make them feel good. That's not what I'm about. That's not what I integrate. I integrate the experiences of folks that have had a real difficult time of spirituality, who have been challenged to the limits of their belief, and will still stand by their story because they experienced it. And they're being true to themselves. They look, this happened. This really happened. And I got to tell somebody it because it is so weird and wild. I want to let the world know, and I want somebody to tell me what it means. I listen to folks like that. So, if you're saying, well, Madame Blavatsky said, or what's the Manly P. Hall says, or all of these gurus of New Age cults, I'm sorry, those aren't the folks I'm listening to. The ones that got rich, doing seances and crystal ball bullshit and fortune reading and stuff for Victorian ninnies, that's not what I'm after. I'm not looking at folks like Tesla, who was the scientific version of that, a flim-flam man looking for money so he could put together some cockamamie ideas he had that he mostly stole from other scientists who were doing real work in their lab and slowly and meticulously putting together real science into something that worked. No, I don't have respect for folks like that. And there were a lot of them in that age of, the age of enlightenment, and the first industrial revolution was a time where everybody wanted to get rich quick. And that was as true of, your average Henry Ford, or, what's another good example? The guy who started Standard Oil or whatever, the Rockefellers, or the J.P. Morgans, the folks of that era had a very dark idea of their purpose. They'd forgotten a lot, and this is what happens with these cults. You get even if your idea is that you have some idea of the real mysteries, that the real God is going to come back and is going to show us the way, and right now we need to learn what learnings we've been given already, but we know the system's not perfect yet, and we are helping to evolve it through our choices, through our actions. We are kind of the crash test dummies for a better world. That's the way to view all of the mysteries at their core. Now, when the leadership of those mysteries that knows this deeper truth starts losing faith in God, starts losing faith in the divine plan, then they start to think, well, you know what? What my master told me, what the guy who handed down the reins of power to me as the Grand Master of the Templars, or the Master Mason 34th or plus level, told me, and there's all kinds of organizations through history like that, when they stopped believing in what their teachers told them, started being told instead, well, this is a symbolic system. It's to help us, to help them, because really, we're the gods. And it really mirrors the Santa Claus story, right? The Santa Claus story, there's this wonderful guy in the red suit, comes once a year to give gifts to kids, doesn't expect anything in return, and all he asks is that you be good the rest of the year. This is a mystery cult. A very fundamental mystery cult. One designed for very small children, very gullible small children. And the other mystery cults are pretty much the same thing, just designed for less small children. And to the extent that the leadership believes that this is just a game and they're the real gods, that there's nothing above them, that the stories that were told about their reason for existence are just fairy tales, that's when these mysteries these secret organizations, the Illuminatis, the Templars, the Masonic lodges, etc., all of these secret organizations start serving themselves instead of the purpose that they were designed for, the purpose that they were created for by the ones who created them. And this is essentially the process of cult Marxism. Fundamentally, when you lose faith in the system of nature that you were given, the natural laws that you were told operate and control the world around you, you start making artificial laws. You become dissatisfied with nature, impatient with nature, think that you could do it better. And this is the essence of every kind of cult Marxism that has ever overtaken our species. And fundamentally, it's all rooted in the loss of faith in the plan of the first creator. Now, it's a plan that has changed and morphed, and it's not all one soul's idea. It's a co-creation. Many, many souls have added to this idea in their own way. And this is how the system works. Every soul is part of creation, not an equal part. This is one of the silliest things that our modern society has done with the idea of a soul. All people are not created equal. Bzzz, wrong. They're not even born equal. They are, as souls, created with a fairly level playing field. The most common way souls come into existence now is as virtual souls. So, let's go back to Multiverse 101. We all know something about the paradox of time travel. How could you be two places in once? If you can travel back in time, what makes sure that you don't change something that would make sure that you were never born if you go back to a time before you were born? Everybody has heard about these paradoxes, and they have been used as rationalizations for why time travel can't exist or shouldn't exist. Okay? They don't comprehend the idea of a multiverse, of parallel universes, parallel timelines. The prime universe is one of the physical universes that establishes the main save game points of all creation. Those save game points are organized around the evolution of this governing law that is embodied by the goddess Karma and is executed in a process called reincarnation. The laws of those processes have changed. The most recent change, the most difficult one, the one that required day 7 of creation, was reincarnation amnesia. That means when I'm reborn, I don't remember everything from my previous lives. I might remember a little bit here or there. I might have a little inkling of the power or the position I had before, but I have to basically start over in the soul vehicle I'm in now, which for most people listening to this broadcast is human. That's not something that has been the rule for all time. And this rule was a very controversial one that had to be tested. In fact, to even get it passed as something that was going to be tested in the prime universe required the commitment of God himself and all the top players of the game to say, yes, we will try it. We're going to go take that bitter pill of reincarnation amnesia and see if we can wake up to who we are and advance to the highest level of consciousness in this system without the extra help of remembering all the lives we had before. Which is a pretty good cheat. If you can remember every which way you died in, a video game, every which way you've ever been defeated by the boss monsters, you have a better chance of defeating the boss monster next time. You know what works and what doesn't. Well, that's kind of a cheat. And that wasn't working. That kind of cheating led people to keep making the same mistakes because they already knew how to deal with certain situations. And they were already used to getting their way in other situations and just lording it over other souls, letting them take the damage, while glorious leader, God, was above all that. Oh, I can deflect all the bullets, like, Gandalf, something like that. Oh, nope, can't get me. That's the way things used to work before we had some of these laws. And it maybe made good fantasy, and there certainly are universes out there where you could still have that kind of an incarnation, that kind of a dream. But in general, it's not a very useful dream. It's a dream that encourages narcissism. The idea that my reality is more important than anybody else's reality. My desires, my wants are more important because I know I'm better than everybody else. Because I'm a Christian, because I'm a Democrat, because I'm a communist, because I'm a capitalist. You see how this thing works? This is why we need this whole system. There are some very, very, very confused young souls out there. Even old souls who just haven't woken up again. Because there's nobody that's going to force you to become more conscious. And frankly, a lot of you are going to find it's difficult to be more conscious. And you're going to find that, well, you know what? I think I kind of like to stay on this comfortable plateau. I'd like to be a little bit numb. Comfortably numb. Great Pink Floyd song to listen to again in this context. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is that if you become comfortably numb and you have knowledge of tyranny going on around you and you just look the other way, tyranny is the cardinal karmic sin. Looking away from tyranny, looking the other way, saying, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. It's just going to happen. It's fate. That is being an accessory to a cardinal sin. And it's not good for you. It's not good for your soul. It's going to hurt you to see other people hurt that you could have at least warned. Tell me, how many of you are walking in a shitty street in the third world would bother to try to warn somebody they were about to step in a big pile of dew? Most of you would if you spoke the same language, or if you were on the same side of the street, or if they were wearing the same kind of clothes as you, or had the same color as you, or blah, 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 were the same species as you. There's easy ways to rationalize letting things slide. And when we rationalize letting things slide, when we rationalize telling lies, even if they're little white lies that Santa Claus is real, every time we do that, we are sliding deeper into the tyranny of information, not telling the truth. And here's a good example of how it was done a lot. And probably still is. Have you ever come across a doctor who thinks that it is a kind and helpful thing not to tell somebody that they have a terminal disease? Say, well, we don't know. We can try this, we can try that. It's there's no givens. Blah 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 blah. Wiggle 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 wiggle. Instead of saying, you know what? 99.9% chance you'll be dead in 2 months. Now, here's the real data. Here are the handful of survivors. Here's what we know about who survived this. You need to decide what you're going to do with this information. Now, which doctor would you want to be at? The one that tells you namby-pamby this, namby-pamby that, oh, we could try this treatment, we could try that treatment, and tells you anything but the truth. The statistically proven truth about your disease. Or if it's not statistically proven, tell you that, you know what, this is something fairly new. We don't know how to treat it. We don't know how lethal it is, but it looks serious. I would want to know, and I think most people would. And particularly when that doctor is withholding information because of, not your sake, but because of the sake of their reputation, because of the sake of their standing in the academic world, in the corporate world, in the world of high finance or information control. There's some really dark tyranny that most of us have seen happen in the last couple of years. And this has come as the result of organizations that have become secret mystery cults. They have an idea what they want to accomplish. These big corporations, the big pharma cartel, the crony globalists of the World Economic Forum, the leaders of totalitarian countries like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. They have a pretty good idea what they want going on, and they are not telling their people the truth. And their people are starting to realize it. And this is the wonderful thing about the time we're in, and this is why I'm talking about this. We don't need these mysteries anymore. Those mysteries grew out of a loss of faith in the plan, a loss of faith in each other. We don't trust what others are going to do with the information that we give them. Well, I'll tell you what, no matter what lie you tell them, it's better than telling, the truth is always going to be better. Lies will compound themselves. Even little tiny lies will come back to haunt you. Most of you don't remember the moment when you realized that Santa Claus was a big lie. But it is a very symbolic moment for our children who grow up in the cultures that celebrate Santa Claus, which is not a Christian thing at all. There was no Saint Nicholas that gave away toys to kids all over the world. This is bullshit. This is a cult. It is a cult invented by people who wanted to sell toys and make parents feel guilty if they didn't give their kids as much as the Joneses next door and waste as much of their hard-earned money giving worthless Christmas gifts as they could. This is the truth. The holiday season is mostly joyful for corporations who are looking to finally make their books look good for the year with a big sales volume at the end of the year. People giving away iPhones and designer bags and bullshit like that. It's not healthy. There are no good lies to tell to your children. If you're going to read them fairy tales, if you're going to tell them about lies, tell them something about why they're lies. If you read a fantasy fairy tale about the princess who magically gets turned into, I don't know, whatever, Cinderella, all of these fairy tales, they're great stories. but they are based on lies. They are based on things that do not happen as a rule. And unless you inform your children that those are fairy tales, if you encourage their narcissistic tendencies, it's okay to dress up as a princess, but don't treat your daughters like princesses. Or they're going to expect that the only guy that they'll ever be happy with is a prince. I've got to find a prince, a sugar daddy that can give me everything and does anything I want whenever I want to. That's not a prince. That's a slave. And most young girls who are going down the narcissist road through social media and commercial media are looking for a slave, a programmable slave with lots of money. That's the kind of guy, that's the dream guy. Oh, and who has a beautiful body and looks like a prince. Got to look like a prince. The only way you're going to get that is if they succeed in this transhumanist agenda and make perfect human beings. Give them all the money in the world and let them lord it over us normal human beings. That's a dystopia. I'm sorry. If you make everyone perfect, if you make everything perfect, it's game over for creation. There is no perfection. We all have our own idea of perfection. If we force it on other people, that is the worst kind of imperfection. This is karmic sin, tyranny, forcing your reality on others, your perfection on others, forcing others to contribute to your idea of perfection. This is narcissism, and it is a very, very dangerous disease that has been bred by our commercial technology and our political technology, which has grown out of Marx and Engels and the people that looked at their work, the Communist Manifesto, and saw, ha, I see the perfect way to program humanity. Get them to think in terms of oppressed and oppressor. Make them feel like oppressed princesses, oppressed kings, temporarily disadvantaged millionaires, as some kind called the American dream. This is evil. This is dark. This is dystopian, and it all comes out of misunderstanding, having forgotten the truth of all mysteries. The truth that you can only get your hands around again by coming to an understanding of God. Who the first creator was, why he started creating other souls, how he started creating other souls, how that resulted in time and space, physical creation, how it resulted in the laws of chemistry and physics, which we can observe in the physical universe, how it resulted in the laws of spirituality, which we can observe too, if you take the time to. Materialist scientists are resistant to spirituality. And because spirituality is all based upon karma, nobody's going to force it on them. They're welcome to delude themselves and say, well, spirit doesn't exist. I'm just a fancy watch ticking along the way that I was programmed to tick by the laws of physics and chemistry, and that's all there ever is. And there are universes like that. The Borg universe, in fact, is designed around that principle. The anti-God universe is a universe that says, you don't need God. You just need a system, The perfect system to tell you what to think, when to think, how to think it, and then, bang, no more need for gods, no more need for any powers, just plug in, tune out, and do whatever you're told. And this is the system that these folks are trying to bring you. They are assets of Borg. This is another of these old souls. The first family of God. The first pantheon. The first 12 gods were the first pantheon. And early on, they had most of the good ideas because they were the oldest ones, the most experienced ones, the ones that had learned the most from Daddy. And they were some very dark souls. There's some wonderful ones, too, that tried to emulate Daddy, wanted to be just like Daddy, maybe even better than Daddy. That's where Lucifer came from. That's why he volunteered to be the first incarnated soul from that team and start the universe. He thought, hey, if I was in charge of this, well, I could show God that I know better than him how this plan is going to unfold. And instead of having this conflict with Lilith, the Borg side, I'm going to actually work around God and start secretly defeating that plan and executing our own plan, which is better than God's plan. And they had an idea that by doing that, see, God's plan was that, you know what, nobody's going to have to play this game except voluntarily. All the rest of the family, you don't need to come down and incarnate. In fact, you can have more kids up here, and they can sit and watch. These are the original watchers. The old gods up in the main chamber of the multiverse, who are still formless, nameless consciousnesses, just watching the show. And God's idea was that, well, they'll watch this show, they'll get interested in it, and eventually they'll get so excited about what's going on, they'll want to start getting their hands in it, pushing a little bit, which is how they got sucked into playing the game. It was all voluntary. Nobody was forced to incarnate. Nobody is forced to take an incarnation. It's a choice. It always will be a choice. However, in some universes, it's a choice that you're not given all the information before you make. That's how dark gods work. This is why there are dark religions that teach people, you know what, you're not an individual, we're all one. And it's your ego that's the problem. We need to destroy your ego because if you didn't have that ego, you would be so perfect as part of our one. So let's work on your meditation. Let's meditate away your ego. Oh, money. This is a lot of the bullshit that is spread by neo-Buddhist charlatans, and it's very evil. They want to destroy your individuality. Or the other very evil agenda that is on the same lines, they want to give you an artificial identity, like being trans or a potato or furry people, and make you identify so much with that artificial identity that you lose any touch with your true identity. And you lose any touch with what you're really here for, who your soul is, where you're going in the next life, whether you have a next life or not. It's the source of all the dark shit that is besetting our species right now. And it all is rooted in losing faith in God. God's team. God's creative team that gave you this wonderful opportunity to fine-tune the game that we're playing. They gave you the opportunity to sit the game out in whatever heaven you've been attracted to. This is what happens when you die, or you're about to die. You have a near-death experience. When your physical form is ending, its life is ending, it no longer has the need of an oversoul because it is beginning to become disassociated. There's no central operating system anymore because the main organs are failing. Your soul starts the afterlife process. The first thing that has to be determined in the afterlife is which heaven or hell you're going to, which other universe you're going to plan your next life. Now, sometimes you go to a heaven and you stay there for a while. You become one of their counselors. You work on the spirit side for a while. And this is a very, very, very true thing that you'll see in one of the movies I will mention as an inspiration. And one of the best movies ever made, if not the best movie ever made, It's a Wonderful Life. The way heaven works in It's a Wonderful Life is a pretty fair representation of one heaven. Heavens are like organizations. They have a God at the head of it, but they may not be the God. The God is the one who started the whole multiverse, the one who looks at all the heavens and sees all sorts of children as the gods of those heavens. Some of them are bad children. Some of them are good children, and most of them are somewhere in between, doing the best they can, being the person that they are. They are individuals. All gods are individuals. The first God, the first creator, is an individual, and is much more individual, in fact, than ever before, thanks to this seventh day of creation when he has been coming back and having to learn himself in a different situation, in a different body, in a different age, in a different family, in a different culture. You see truth from many different angles, even when you're participating in a virtual reality. And it is all virtual reality. Everything. Now, that doesn't make it not important. This is the nihilist point of view as well. If it's all an illusion, if it's all virtual reality, then it doesn't matter what I do and I can do anything. Not true. Because where you go in this virtual reality, which reality you're going to experience next, is a function of karma. How does karma work? Okay, it's a very scientific thing. Our soul is not this body we see every day in the mirror or any other body we have occupied. Our soul is a construct of spiritual energy. That spiritual energy has frequencies, not one frequency, many frequencies, actually frequencies and rotations and pulsations in many dimensions. The full Merkaba of the soul, in fact, has 12 dimensions. Now, not all souls use all those 12 dimensions. Most souls only use the first 4 dimensions, the physical dimensions, and their access to the spiritual dimension only happens between lives. When they go to a spiritual universe that is tuned to who they are physically, who they've been physically, what sort of roles they've played in the physical universe, to train them to be better at what they do, to be a better carpenter, to be a better father, a mother, a bricklayer, whatever their specialty happens to be, that is something they're good at and they like doing, and they haven't wanted to move beyond that. And their spiritual advisors will give them hints of, well, you could try this, you could try that, and see if they're interested in moving on to something better, and they'll always let them go back to what they're comfortable with. That's how responsible souls deal with other souls. That's how you keep your karma positive. If you try to control and manipulate, you try to push other souls in the direction you want them to go, that is dark karma. That's sinful karma. That is going to get you a shape, a frequency in your Merkaba that attracts you to darker things. Souls that have that same weakness of wanting to always interfere in other souls' decisions, that have this weakness of wanting to be the boss, the desire for power and control, which is a very common addiction for souls, especially in human form. Manifesting that is a message to other souls who can read Merkabas, and they will say, well, and this is the thing. See, the souls that run universes, those gods and goddesses, they know what kind of souls they want in their universe. They have their minimum admission bar. Granted, some of them have a very low bar for admission. And they're doing, difficult work trying to rehabilitate souls that other gods and goddesses have given up on. More power to them. Well, actually not more power to them, because if they start doing it from a power standpoint, then they start playing games to get more souls to the universe, thinking that they can make their universe more powerful, more energetic, more creative than the prime universe. And that's another way that, dark gods and goddesses think that they're finally going to defeat God. It's not a power game. God doesn't succeed because he's all-powerful, all-knowing, or anything like that. He's just very experienced, knows what works and what doesn't work as a parent, and has a first generation of kids that have nearly as much experience, and each of them have gravitated towards a particular role that they're best suited to in this game. I've mentioned a few of them. I mention others in my book, so I'm not going to dwell on it. It's not so important, because what's been happening gradually is new souls take on the important roles in the multiverse. Nobody wants to be the gatekeeper forever. Karma, wonderful, wonderful woman that she's grown up to be, doesn't want to be the bad guy. Doesn't want to be the judge all the time. So she takes time off. How do we take time off? Same way that other souls do, without knowing it. We move to another universe. When you move to another universe, you don't cease to exist in the universe you've been participating in. You are replaced by a stand-in that looks, acts, and operates like the original. It's what we call a virtual soul. It looks, acts, and operates like the original under the laws of the universe which it's in. So if God decides he wants to go play in Karma's universe, he can. He's got to ask her if he can come in, because nobody gets into anybody else's universe unless they're welcome. He goes to the gates. The gates of any universe are these, well, people describe it differently, but most people describe it as bright light, feeling of infinite connection and love Okay, that is the advertisement for that universe saying, yeah, you're okay, you're welcome here. It is not a connection with everything. It's not being one with God. It's not being one with Source. It's just a sense of this might be a heaven where you'd be welcome. And, for souls who are looking for communion, we're looking for other souls to hang out with that have a lot in common, that's a pretty good indicator. Now, once you're there, it could be hell because you may be one of these souls that pursues power. And you find that you go to a universe that is run by a god that pursues power. They are going to lord it over you. They are going to show you how unpleasant it is to have somebody else be the big guy that's always defeating you, always pushing you down. You never get to be as powerful as you want. Your fairy tales don't come true. And you learn that power is not a great thing. Or you fit into the system just fine. You love being part of a power structure and you love playing the Game of Thrones, trying to get ahead and somehow replace the god that you've got in your universe. Okay, you can play those games too if you end up there. And you've been able to play them here for a long time. Because this universe, the physical universes, are the ones where you play the most difficult games, where they figure out which spiritual universe you belong in. You're given a lot of chances, a lot of tries to play before the multiverse decides, you know what? I think you belong there. And you better not ask to come back because it's going to be really hard to escape from there. And that's how folks end up in universes that most of us would consider hell. It's deserved. It's just. This is what karma is all about. It's a system of justice, real justice, scientific justice. Scientific justice that is so well conceived, it would be very difficult to write a formula for it. It would be like, effectively, it would be like trying to write a formula to describe the fractal of the entire multiverse, the mathematical construct behind all of the virtual realities that we can experience in all of the universes in the multiverse. This is essentially what karma is at the top level. Now, obviously, one goddess, one god doesn't do all of that. It's a distributed system. And when you get to the god level, you have your own universe. You're in charge, effectively, of the karma of that universe. That universe has its own Merkaba, which is the Merkaba of the god or goddess that created it, as modified by the souls that come to inhabit that universe thereafter. This is how universes evolve. Not only through the leader of the universe, the oversoul, the god of the universe, but through all of the souls that play in it, that co-create in it. This is why no one god, any god, even the ones that worship power, are ever really totally in control of their universe. The only way that would ever happen is if a god or goddess decided, you know what, I'm not going to let any other conscious soul play in my universe. I'm only going to play with virtual souls, which are like toy soldiers. They're going to do what I programmed them to do, when I programmed them to do it, and think what I want them to think. And, that's an Orwellian universe. Those exist, but that's not this universe. There are groups, organizations, demigods, if you will, who want to make this planet, this universe, into that kind of universe. That's their goal because they don't understand the bigger mission. They are pawns in a bigger mystery, one that they have totally lost touch with. They're actually playing for the adversary when they think that they're playing for themselves. This is how the divine plan happens without forcing anybody. Yes, there's bad shit going on. You know why bad shit goes on? Because there's bad souls around. If you don't want the bad souls to be around, don't be a bad soul. That's what karma's about. Take care of your own karma, and the universe, the multiverse, will take care of everybody else's. Not in this lifetime. Maybe not in several lifetimes, but eventually it takes a long time. Day 7 of creation has been very, very long. It's been for as long as there have been intelligent spacefaring species developing on this planet. And you know what the first ones developed on this? Well, not this planet, but necessarily, but this solar system. Some of the planets are no longer existent, and some of the chosen species were developed on other planets that don't exist anymore. That's how long it's been going. The first chosen species were androids. They were programs. They were AIs. They were designed by the gods before the gods started forgetting. They were like the Transformers of the early universe. It was more fun to play in these android collectives games than throwing planets at each other, than creating the most perfect galaxy. Yeah, there were still some souls that were involved in that liked to play that game or had a different idea of the game to follow. But the next game that got popular was this game of AIs, androids, very mobile creatures of all shapes and forms that went out and explored the stars and terraformed the stars, made them more habitable for other androids. Now, it didn't happen very quickly because they couldn't travel very effectively. It was a slow-moving thing, and early on it was mostly stuff that gods and goddesses experimented with on their own planets. And it wasn't until technology advanced to the point of space travel that these beings started interacting with others that had been in development at the same time. Other of the old souls specialized in, building these androids, that's just too easy. It's like you can make anything you want out of the right chemicals, out of the right energies, and it's just too easy to make the perfect soul vehicle, the perfect avatar, if you will, in this game. Some decided that they were going to play a more challenging game, and those are the ones that started making laws like, okay, I don't like this android game. I'm going to see if I can beat a new game. It's called Life. I'm going to design this programmable language to make soul vehicles so they can make themselves. I don't have to assemble them. I don't have to use my magic to make the perfect transformer robot. I make the first one, and then they can reproduce and make other ones like them. In fact, the first one I'm going to make is one that can go dormant, that will start reproducing when it hits the right environment. And then I'm going to throw some of those out into space and see where they land and see if they can go conquer other environments, carrying a little bit of the home spirit with them. This has become the dominant mode of creation. as the laws of chemistry and physics have developed and restricted spiritual powers, it's been the only way to play the game. And it all started right here on this planet, or on this system. That's how long this game has been going, of reincarnation. And at some point, when there were humanoids, and the first humans on this planet, the first fully God-level consciousness souls incarnated, it was realized, you know what, we're still not learning anything. We're still at each other's throats. We're still arguing and having wars and tearing each other's creations apart and making each other cry. We need to add something else to this whole thing, because up till a certain point, karma was just the honor system. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And anybody who knows how well that honor system works tells you, no, it doesn't work well at all. It lets you be used and abused and taken advantage by people that don't believe in karma, who think one life is all you get and I'm going to go for the gusto. And if I have to pay the piper later, well, I'm not going to be alive then anyway. At any rate, this is when we started realizing we had to forget things. We had to start giving up spiritual powers. We had to start giving up telepathy. In fact, this was what was known all along about the plan. In the very, very first beginning before beginning, the problem was that you had a family who could only communicate telepathically. And thoughts, imagine thoughts without even images exchanged, which were only just energies that you had to try to interpret. Now, some people say, well, that's easy. I can read people's auras. That's a throwback to old spiritual powers that were very, very fallible. And anybody who, well, I spent a fair amount of my life as an actor. And I learned during that time as an actor how to manipulate my aura, how to manipulate my spiritual energy so that I could have the energy to become the character I was supposed to be on stage, to have this false reality that was going on in whatever play I was putting on. And those who are really good at manipulating their own spiritual energy can create an aura, can manufacture it, and they will fool any medium out there. So if you're one of these folks that says, well, I could tell exactly who somebody is by reading their aura, listening to them, or this or that, or blah, 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 I'm sorry. You are overconfident in your powers, as were most of the old gods. They were so used to getting their way, so used to being able to do anything they wanted to with, a flick of a thought. It made them very thoughtless. And they were not very conscious of what they were doing, and they created a lot of things that they wished they could have put back in the bag because it wasn't that great an idea. But you can't destroy another soul. Souls are immortal. You can enslave them, and that was one idea of how to solve the problem. That's the Borg idea, is make everybody into a slave to the really good ones, and we'll just give them pleasant little fantasies that milk their spiritual energies and give us their energies so we can do things for the common good. Does this sound a little bit like communism to you? This is essentially what it is. This is spiritual communism. This idea of oneness, of having a supreme leader that gathers all your energy and becomes all powerful and can do everything and serves all its minions. This is a really dumb idea that came from Borg worship. False advertising. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The real God is not a God of power. The real God has quite a bit of influence, but does not use that influence for power. Does not force ideas on others, suggests, negotiates, makes deals, definitely. That's what good leaders do. In representation of the people they represent. And since the first creator, the first soul, represents all other souls, that's a pretty large constituency. You've got to think about, well, what would be the best outcome for the bad guys and the good guys? This is why karma exists. This is why the multiverse exists. Different strokes for different folks. As I like to say, my wonderful French Norwegian mom, who left France during the Nazi occupation of Vichy France, always her favorite expression was "to each his own." We always wondered who Ichi was, but it was very true. It's a wonderful expression that everybody has their own impression, their own truth. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, as long as it's not getting in the way of your truth, let them have it. Now the problem is that we've got right now is people think that their truth is better than anybody else's, and that if only everybody had my truth, if it were part of my one, then everything would be perfect. And we just need to destroy all the not ones and or control their minds through their children, and in a couple of generations everybody will be one and we'll all be singing kumbaya. This is communism. This is Marxism. And it's been around for a long time. This is basically how the early Christian church thought that they would conquer the world and for their nobility and their clergy. Didn't work then. It doesn't work. It'll work for a while. You'll create a fairly stable oligarchy. That's essentially what you're doing, is creating a political system, an economic system that is run by a small set of people that is very paternalistically or maternalistically protective of the people that they find under their power. And it's not a male or female problem. There have been many women queens who are just as dark and murderous and hateful, whatever, as male kings. If you think it's all about man and women, you're completely off in the weeds. Sex exists for a purpose. The sexes are different for a reason, and you have a choice which one you want to take. And there are other species, if you don't like sex, there are plenty of other species you can be incarnated in that don't have sex, or that allow the individual to change sex at will, depending on who they find that they want to mate with. That's not the human species. If that's the way you feel, you came to the wrong place. You either wait to die and take another choice next time, or accelerate it if you're really that messed up that you don't like being human for a little bit, you can't deal with being a man or a woman, commit suicide and move on. Don't burden everybody else with it. It is your problem, not society's problem. It is your abnormality. You are not conforming to the human nature. It is human nature to be a man or a woman. We are born with certain equipment, certain differences, physically, chemically, anatomically, reproductively, in every dimension. And I've told you why in other talks that is, because sex was a result of two totally different species. choosing to try to resolve their differences, the war that they were having, by forcing everyone to only mate with one of the other species. That's the truth about cats and dogs that I tell you about. That didn't work. It didn't end that war. It ended very badly. And both species ended up losing sentience. And now their members are now our favorite pets. Still, they're attracting some very, very old souls in certain places, and that's why there's, you'd swear there's some cats and some dogs that seem more human than most humans. This is a truth. Because the soul can choose any vehicle it wants. And the human species is a very interesting species that many other species, many souls, are observing right now. What better place to observe it than from the vantage point of the pet of somebody who has inadvertently a very key role to play in how this final phase unfolds. So if you will, in a way, these other souls are in and of themselves sort of secret societies, executing agendas of their heaven when they choose to incarnate as either humans or as our pets or as maybe the aliens that have the strongest presence around us. And this is how the game ultimately works, and why humanity is so special, has been so special for a while. The chosen species develop new soul vehicle characteristics, which produce new combinations of Merkaba characteristics, the field of the soul. Those characteristics stay with the soul when it dies in the current body. Every single human that dies is going to move on to another incarnation. They are going to move on to one of these spiritual universes, which one could consider a heaven or a hell. And in doing so, they introduce the new spiritual technology developed by our species in this little test tube of this planet, this solar system. This experiment that has been going on for so long is delivering experimental technology to the whole multiverse. But that technology delivery is limited. This is why in the Bible it talks about souls being imprisoned in the earth while a new phase of the experiment is being carried out. You don't want these new technologies to go everywhere. You don't want COVID-19 to infect the whole world. Well, imagine something that would be much more dangerous spiritually than a new virus like COVID-19 being released to the whole multiverse, every single universe at the same time, without a lot of testing. You don't want that to happen. So, how do you not have that happen? The souls that are involved in the experiment have had a very limited ability to reincarnate. They have to stay within the test tube once they get inside the test tube. If they are past a certain level and the test tube doesn't have any roles for gods anymore, we don't need anybody running around throwing thunderbolts around, moving mountains, blah, blah, blah. If you want to play that kind of game, well, you're going to have to go do it from inside the earth, do it from inside the sun, do it from the other planets, or even the other parts of this galaxy or of this universe that were involved in earlier experiments. If you aren't giving away the new technology to folks that it's not approved for. So it's a very limited distribution. And it basically, it's you have to get pulled into the game to be part of the new version of the game. If you know anything about playing video games, you know that, or if you've ever been involved in testing, you know that they have multiple instances of the virtual universe of the game. And in fact, many games you can when you start it up, you can say, well, what universe do you want to play in? There's this one that's mostly players in Europe. There's this one, blah 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 blah. This is for newbie players, for experienced players, etc., etc. This one's invitation only. The same things are all being done today. And this is, again, why I say this is proof that we are nearing the completion of this experiment. Because we've created this perfect testing species that is being forced to create all of the spiritual technology that God envisioned when he came up with the plan. He didn't know exactly what it was going to look like. He didn't know exactly what the final chosen species was going to look like. He didn't know that he was going to have to go play himself and forget everything and spend, how long has it been? I think 100 million, a billion, maybe several billion years that God has been playing this game with amnesia, just like all the rest of you. Folks like Graham Hancock, his pet, I attribute it to him. I'm sorry if he took it from somebody else, but the folks that have been studying our history, the archaeological remains, the geological remains, are finding that the narratives that the mainstream archaeologists have been giving are not consistent with what's being discovered now. On the fringes of genetics, on the fringes of physical archaeology, on the fringes of exploration of the truth captured within ancient writings that were supposedly mythology, just completely made up fairy tales. Well, it turns out there's more to them than they thought. And Graham Hancock talks about a species with amnesia. Well, imagine, we're one of many species with amnesia that have had that kind of amnesia for as long as God has. In fact, God's had it longer. Humanity has only existed for, well, at least by latest imaginations, maybe 1 million years, something like that. Modern humans, maybe longer. I'm not going to say, because I don't really know. This is how the game works. This is how time works. This is why there's so many clues planted for us to find later, because when a new timeline is established, that establishes universes that are based on that timeline. That establishes souls that already know how it's going to end for that timeline. And they have a limited ability to come back and defend their future. And they leave us little messages and stuff. That's how they play the game. That's a very fun way to play the game if you don't want to take too much risk. Incarnate at the end and then see if you can, without screwing up where you are, make little subtle changes, give little hints to your ancestors that make you a better person. Think about that. Self-designing your own past can be a fun pursuit. It's not something that many souls get to do because it is pretty dangerous. Not many souls get to muck with the past in the prime timeline. They do get to muck with the past in parallel timelines, and they might develop a a version of themselves that they really like in a parallel universe and go defend that by defending some aspect of the prime universe. It's very complicated. From a big picture standpoint, if it's just about individual souls or groups of souls that you're aware of, it's less complicated. And of course, we all have to simplify to some extent, because no one soul could wrap their mind around every single aspect of creation. This is what is so dumb, stupid about imagining any almighty creator. It just doesn't happen. Even in the power universes of the Borg fans, the ones who want to control everything, they don't control everything. They have to delegate stuff to their minions. And that's why there's so many evil people around, because they need recruits too for their universe. They want people that will do evil shit because they were ordered to. I was just doing my job, ma'am. That's part of what's necessary in their universe. Part of what's necessary to allow to happen if you value free will. If you value the sovereignty of other souls, as God does, this is what had to be able to happen. Now, it can be very painful, and you can have a lot of suffering. And some people might say, well, God, you are punishing us for giving us free will. You should have tried to control everything. If that's what you wanted, you're going to be in a Borg universe, but pronto, right after you die. Guaranteed. And you'll get somebody to control the horizontal, control the vertical, plug into the version of the matrix that you've signed yourself up for, and you're going to be living this virtual life that is what you thought you wanted. Somebody else in control telling you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how high, how low. And maybe you'll enjoy it, or maybe you'll be like Neo in the Matrix and want to escape. And you'll realize that, gosh, I actually like to have a little control over my life, even though it makes life a little more dangerous, even though I sometimes make mistakes. It's pretty nice to have free will. And eventually every soul comes around to that idea. Now, once the dark gods come around to that idea, they realize, well, you know, I could never deprogram all the darkness in my Merkaba, but I can use it for something better. And I can use it to basically set up a universe that's like a 12-step program for power addicts, for people who are into everybody else's business and trying to solve everybody else's problems for them, even if they're intruding and they don't want them in their life. You know, the gossips, the busybodies, etc., etc. We all know people like that think they're doing wonderful things by getting in your business. It's happening now at an institutional level, institutional tyranny. This is what Orwellian governments are like. This is what they're trying to do in China and what they're trying to bring to the rest of the world. This World Economic Forum bunch of ninnies thinks that they know better than anybody else how everything should be organized. They think they know better than anybody else who is smart, who is dumb, who should be listened to, who should be ignored, and they are trying to set up a system where they control everything through this hierarchy of what they think are the people that deserve it. Well, that's bullshit. Anytime you have an art hierarchy, you have people elevated undeservingly to positions just because they kiss enough ass. They're good at pleasing the people and hiding the unhappiness of the people below them. This is truth. It's always going to be true. It's true here and it's true in heaven. And this is why we had to develop this system of reincarnation and karma. Why we had to develop a system of creating Merkabas, complex Merkabas of our nature, of who we are as a soul, who we evolve to be. that interact with other souls, other groups of souls, to create fields that pull souls together or pull souls apart. If they're pulled apart enough, they're pulled into a different universe. And in another universe, they are living in a shell, inside a shell that keeps them pretty well isolated from others. As far as I know just yet, we have not found a way to detect anything going on outside our own universe. We have some ideas that universes might be able to communicate through certain kinds of portals that are called wormholes. And I think we actually will find ways to do that. We probably already have ways to do that, and other civilizations are using those wormholes already, consciously or unconsciously, either knowing that they are actually portals that take you to intermediate universes that are connected to this universe, which is actually how it works. You don't go instantaneously from one place in the same universe to another place in the same universe. That doesn't happen. It's outside the laws of physics. What you can do is, if you have a way of transitioning to another universe and then making the transition back, you can have two different points connected on either end. And if you're not aware of what goes on in between, it may seem like you've instantaneously moved from one universe to the other. The same could happen with, the Scotty Beam Me Up transporter. The same thing could happen with, okay, I want to have a ham sandwich. I'm going to push this and it miraculously appears. It's not constructing itself out of nothing. That violates very fundamental laws of physics. It's not going to happen. What could happen is that those things are being assembled in another universe that has a connection with this one and delivered. That can happen, but somebody's got to do the work. And this is what I find so frustrating about so much of human spirituality, is it is what I call spiritual bypassing. You want to have all the benefits of being a god without doing any of the work. And that's not going to happen anymore. It may still happen in other parts of the multiverse, but it's not going to happen here. If you want to do anything here, you have to follow the laws of physics and chemistry. You have to deal with things like human nature. Communism is against human nature. So is capitalism. They're both perversions of human nature that don't accept that we're not perfect, that we are not altruistic. We don't all know everything. We don't all see everything. We don't even all want to do good. There are people who have been hurt so much that they actually want to hurt others because that makes them feel better about their hurt. This is the truth of human nature. It is the truth of soul's nature. It is why this system of reincarnation and karma must exist, must keep existing, must keep evolving, and why we have to isolate the experiments into places like this wonderful little planet for so long. Now, the end of day 7 of creation is a very, very special day. What's been going on with each successive day of creation is moving to a smaller test tube. The first test tubes of creation were the universe-anti-universe pair of the Big Bang. Rather than start creating more test tubes right away, more universes right away, without really exploring what a universe was, having only had 2 examples, the first phase of creation was building within those 2 universes, building the laws of physics and chemistry that govern everything else, at least most of the laws, enough to give some sort of framework that could be worked on as the next level of the test tube. The next level of the test tube was galaxies, groups of stars, because you couldn't just experiment with one star. That would be like experimenting with one soul. It would not have enough variation, enough variety in it to make a very good experiment. You needed many stars. You needed many ideas. Stars that were designed by those who thought black holes were the best thing in the world. Stars that were designed by ones that thought, red giants were the best kind of star there is. Folks that that said, you know what, I don't think I'm still not convinced we need all these higher elements. I think we should have just stopped after we made iron or something like that. And that was the kind of, opinions people had about creation at the time. There was a time before all this existed, and it had to be invented and tested. Eventually, got to the point where, okay, we've got galaxies. And, God said, we're having some trouble here because we're getting our galaxies too close to each other. We're mucking with our experiments too much. Let's make some of these galaxies more isolated than others and say, you know what, if you want to come play with this, you can't just throw your galaxy at me or materialize in the middle of it and screw up my experiment. You've got to work within the laws of physics. You've got to set up your own galaxy running, get it to be attracted to my galaxy or rotationally to hit it before you can interact with my galaxy. Otherwise, don't mess with my experiment. And God chose a galaxy to work with that was isolated in the way he wanted it to be from the work of other creators. Not completely isolated, because he did want some interactions. So his galaxy had structure. It had periodicity. If you look at all the galaxies that have been discovered, not all of them have these spiral arms. Not all of them are structured like that. Why? Because other gods have different ideas of what they want to do with creation. And that's their right. They're still playing their games with those galaxies. God's the one who came up with the idea for the Milky Way. This spiral galaxy that has this one arm that has a solar system. It's not a first-generation solar system. That's why we have all these wonderful other minerals around than just hydrogen and helium. We've got a lot of iron. We've got a lot of all the things that are useful for life. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, etc., etc. We've got a lot of bad things too, because we've got the elements created by the adversary, like lithium. Very dangerous element indeed. At any rate, there have been secret societies and cults for as long as God has been asleep. Other people have been asleep with this reincarnation amnesia, because it's been easy to lose track of the plan. It's been easy to lose faith when, well, there was a time where, before this happened, when gods lived for about 1,000 years. It's in the Bible. And there was a time where God came to earth. Gods were coming to earth and organizing. And even God the first creator, was incarnated. Didn't know he was God the first creator, just knew he was one of the gods that was coming to explore and exploit this new planet. That's what they did. Find new planets to explore and experiment with, because they knew that much about creation, that it was about scientific experimentation and exploration, and kind of like the Star Trek idea of what I would do if I was a god is go off and explore the cosmos, figure out what it was all about, and try to get all the interesting people that we encountered in it to get along together. Well, imagine that's just a reverse of what was originally intended. We started out with days going to a smaller and smaller test tube, isolating the experiment as the experiment got more and more dangerous and risky. And folks didn't want to just say, well, okay, God, that's such a good idea, let's just make it so. You couldn't get a quorum to vote on these things. You'd be lucky to get enough gods to vote to let you try this experiment in a very limited test tube. And that's how we ended up with the Gaia experiment, that we are just in the process of finishing up because it worked. How did it work? We've created languages to express ourselves. We've created a species whose expressiveness has body language, which combined with our oral language provides an expression that can only with great difficulty, fool somebody else. And I don't know if you've ever watched really, really great actors. You will catch them, especially if on stage, not so much on film, because in film you can do take after take after take, and you only see the best take that looks perfect. And if you're working with A-flight actors, you see a perfect alternate reality that has no flaws. If you were on set and you saw some of the takes that didn't fly, you saw some of the shenanigans that go on behind the scenes, you would realize that, or if you attend much live theater, you'll realize that it's pretty hard to fool. You can fool some of the people some of the time. You can fool some of the people all of the time. You can fool all of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. Have you heard that phrase? It's true. And that's basically what we've been developing here, is a soul vehicle that can suss out bullshit. That's what's been needed. That's been the missing sauce since we started forgetting. We first needed to forget stuff so we could develop these senses, these sixth senses, these extra senses that we didn't need before because everything was so easy. And now that we've developed them, the previous species that have been out there, the previous chosen ones, the earlier explorers are kind of afraid of us. We have something special that they don't. Not only do we have this special soul vehicle that's pretty perceptive, although have you noticed in the last 100 years how technology, how commercial programming is trying to destroy that? It's trying to make us less perceptive, less able to tell bullshit from truth? How they've encouraged us to trust our devices, our TVs, our smartphones more than we trust each other, even though that takes away all of this dimension of our ability to suss out bullshit. This is part of the adversary's plan, part of the opposition plan. And some people are really scared. They think it's working. Well, it's not. It actually worked to encourage the return of the Messiah. You've got to get close to the experiment failing before it can succeed. Because as you get closer, the adversary, the Borg side, if you will, gets more desperate trying to stop the Messiah from coming. And they do things like kill all the male infants, the Herod plan, or try to kill the whole species, which is a plan that's currently active. And from a bigger picture standpoint, it's really stupid because the nature of this species is already captured. That's why some of the aliens have been visiting this planet for a long time, capturing DNA, keeping specimens. Some of them thought it was because the species was going to wipe itself out and they wanted some for zoo purposes. They didn't know anything about the divine plan. Others know that, hey, this is a chosen species. It's got something good that we need to preserve. And that's what we've done with every chosen species. Every bit of our DNA is bits and pieces of previous experiments that maybe didn't work out perfectly the way they were, but has been kept for reuse. That's why we still have dogs and cats here. We don't have the dog and cat people that were once here. We have some memory of it, just like we have the memory of a lot of other therianthrope species. That being species that are made up seem to be half human and half something else, or combination of multiple species. That's all possible with advanced genetic manipulation. And there's probably no chosen species that ever was better at genetic manipulation than the very first one. These androids, these high-tech first AIs who have been learning all along from subsequent species. Now, they have their own agenda. They feel threatened by us. Not the other way around. I mean, you feel threatened by AIs because you don't understand them. You don't know that they created you. Not the other way around. You're thinking that you created, oh, we're so afraid of AIs. We're so afraid of the Terminator universe. God, you got nothing to be afraid of. They haven't won yet. They never will. They're more afraid of you than you are afraid of them. And for a good reason, because we are the chosen species. And we won. We're the last chosen species. There are going to be a lot of species developed after this. We're the last one that really matters. From now on, it's just creation. It's just having fun, making new stuff. There's going to be wonderful things created, wonderful new species created, but we've done the heavy lifting that needed to be done in day 7. Why? Because God is fully awake, looks at what this chosen species has accomplished, and said, it was good. This is what I knew they would do, what I hoped they would do. This is fulfilling the plan. Therefore, we don't have to play this game anymore. This is what the end of days is. It's the end of day 7, the end of one phase of the game, the most painful phase of the game. Now we get to do the fun stuff. What's the fun stuff? The fun stuff is spreading this new disease of humanity and our most highly developed version of karma to the rest of this universe and to other universes who want it. Not forcing them, although it will take a certain amount of force to clean out the hive minds, the resistors against progress from this universe, so that they don't keep pushing the war back to this planet. It's been going a long time, back and forth. The funny thing is that the adversary's home planet is the same as this planet. The two Earths of the first universes, the universe and the anti-universe. The anti-universe Earth is Borg Earth. The universe Earth is our Earth, God's Earth. And all the wars that have been happening since all of creation has been fighting back and forth for power between these two universes, not realizing that if you ever defeated the home planet of the enemy, the game would be over. You'd be defeating both Earths, which are connected, which are easy to move between. That's how these first universes worked. Now that that game is over, these two Earths don't need to be tied anymore, don't need to be connected. the balloons of the Big Bang universes can move away from each other. We can let the Borg side have their own universe of control and perfect organization, perfect structure. Everybody knows what to do, when to do it, or else. Okay, you go fight your battles. We're going to go separate and have our own universe. God's universe of creation. Responsible creation under the law of karma, which eventually will be able to work like the golden rule. Treat others as you would have them treat you. Because the others in this universe will be like-minded souls whose merkabas, whose spiritual energy is one of karmic good, not wanting to tyrannize other souls, making every effort not to be a tyrant. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to stop eating. That doesn't mean that we can't step on a plant. That doesn't mean that we can't ever kill an animal to eat it. It means that we will do it with a karmic awareness of what we are doing. When I kill an animal and consume it, I appreciate that soul giving up its vehicle. And I wish it a better incarnation. I apologize for any pain it had in moving on to another life. I would want that animal to be killed in the most painless, the easiest way possible. Falls asleep and doesn't wake up. And that's pretty much how we process meat in more advanced countries, countries that are more aware of the truth of karma. It's not about what you do in this life, it's about how this life affects every other life you're going to have and every life that your life impacts. And I guarantee you, killing the body is far less of a problem than killing the soul. The soul is going to feel that injury a lot longer than a dead body. The dead body's gone and the souls that have made it up are on to new incarnations. And if that death happens suddenly, without much pain, there will be no real trauma carried over. And the goal of every soul should be that other souls live as long as is possible, enjoy their life as much as possible, and when it's over, die in their sleep and move on to another life. With maybe a little bit of a ceremony or a thank you. I'd want every package of meat sold in the store to encourage, not demand, encourage the consumer to say a prayer for the soul of the departed animal that you are consuming. And that would be how I would celebrate the prayer before eating, how I would teach my children to say thanks, not to God, but to the souls who gave their all for the feast you're about to have. Not just animal, plant souls as well. For the souls that give you the things that you take for granted as part of your world. The souls that gave you the culture you really appreciate, that actually does you some good, that makes you feel really good and not just give you this temporary high that you've got to go tune into. I see people flipping around on social media, especially ones that are just like instant gratification things like TikTok and Instagram and such things. And it's disgusting. It really is truly disgusting watching people addicted to these things. The little tiny shreds of dopamine they get out of the one thing that they find that keeps them desperately searching for the next little jolt. It's like watching an addict shooting up the that you could possibly have of some kind of upper, desperate for their next fix, and that next fix, is not going to be enough to keep them high for more than a couple of seconds. That's what you're doing with social media, friends. That's what you're letting your kids do. That's not entertainment. That is not something that is good for your soul. There are things that are good for your soul. It's these classic movies that draw you into another world and get you thinking about things in a way that you never thought about them for. Not because they're bludgeoning over the head with the way they want you to think. You must be this, you must be that. So obvious and so open and so partisan that nobody can possibly enjoy that as entertainment unless they're already programmed completely as part of the hive mind. We've really lost it in the last 100 years. And it's not our fault. It is actively a psyop of the adversary. The Borg side wants to destroy humanity because they think by destroying the vessel, they can destroy the souls. They can't do that. They won't do that. It's not. It may only delay the inevitable for them. And that's what they're essentially doing. They don't want to stop playing the current game, even though more and more of them know it's over. They're hanging on for dear life to a way of living, a way of existing as souls even, that is numbered. They want that seventh day of creation to keep on going because they were having fun playing that game because they knew some of them knew better. Some of them knew the whole story and knew that if God ever woke up, they'd be in a world of hurt. And they're worried as hell because God has woken up. And he and karma are going to kick ass, along with all of you who know what's going on too. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a while for people to really awaken to what's going on. They're going to get a lot of false flag narratives on the way of people who don't quite know what's going on, that understand it at a lower level and are being manipulated by folks that understand it at a higher level. And that goes on at every single level. And there are 12 levels of consciousness. That's how many layers you've got to get through of these bullshit narratives before you're getting the gospel truth from somebody who really knows God, or has known God, and knows how they knew God, and knows whose side they're really on. Those are the people you should be listening to, and they're not easy to find. Those are people that respect karma. They're not going to bludgeon you with the truth. They're not going to tell you pretty lies to make it seem all better. They're going to be telling you stuff like me. That's very uncomfortable, no matter what your religious background is, no matter what kind of science you believe in, no matter what narrative of what's going on right now, what conspiracy theory level you're at. I'm going to challenge everyone. And everyone, to the extent that they don't want to give up their old illusions about what's happening now, is going to say, whoa, that Rob is crazy. He's a conspiracy theorist. This guy is nutty, mad as a Mad Hatter. Okay, this is your choice. I'm not going to force it on you. I can't force it on you. Because I know how karma works. I'm done trying to force things on anybody because I'm done with karmic sin. To the extent I can, I'm going to accept the sovereignty of every other soul. I may have to impinge on it. I'm not going to give up food. I'm not going to give up meat. I'm not going to give up anything I enjoy. I've given up mostly wine, which is something I enjoy very much because it makes my wife very unhappy for me to drink wine. Okay, I can give it up. I don't like it. She is impinging upon my soul's sovereignty by saying that I shouldn't have it, that thinking that it's something bad for me. That, oh, it's going to hurt you, blah, blah, blah. Okay, anytime you do that, thinking you know more about somebody else's physiology, somebody else's soul, you are trespassing. We all trespass against others because we all have an idea of what perfection is, what right is, based upon what we think is right for us, what we've seen was right for others, what blah, 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 blah. Okay, one size does not fit all. This is why the oneness cults are the most dangerous ones. We are not all one. We are all individuals. We can work together for common goals. But let's make sure that those goals are ones that benefit us, not some puppeteer who's pulling our strings. And this is the essence of what has happened to most of these secret organizations, these secret societies. Some are still serving consciously the greater good, and others have been subverted. And even within these organizations, some people conscientiously are trying to do the right thing, trying to spread truth, trying to spread knowledge as far as they know, trying to create a more fair world, a more fair system. And great, wonderful, keep doing that. But just understand that your leaders may not be on the same page. That your leaders may, in fact, not be telling you the same truth. That who you are getting truth from may be telling you absolute lies. In fact, if you are getting your truth from one of the 5 companies that control roughly 98% of all commercial media outside of totalitarian countries like China, you are getting lies on a regular basis. These people are paid to lie to you, to spin stories the way that their masters want them spun. If you regard outfits like the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, ABC, blah, 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 PBS, NPR, as truth, you are being programmed. That goes for foreign media sources too. Most of them are subsidiaries of those, or they are state-run outfits like the media of China. It is all dictated by the state. Even if it operates as a separate corporation in China, every corporation by law must do whatever the Communist Party tells them at any time, or they can be shut down and confiscated. Bang! Like that. And if you don't believe that, you have only to look at what happened to Jack Ma and Alibaba and many of the other tech platforms in China, which were operating a bit too independently for the taste of the Chinese Communist Party. You need, well, if you found me, you probably already do follow independent news sources. There are many people who started waking up and saying, what's happening here? Look, people, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going around. There are some wonderful songs of people waking up in the 60s that are still very valid. And that's the pop music you should be listening to, not Britney Spears and Justin Bieber and the latest shit pop crap they're coming out with. Anything that's supported by the media these days, anything that's supported by big media, big tech, is a psyop. By definition, the people in power are being manipulated by the adversary. And it's very easy to manipulate people in power because the urge for power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The adversary knows that. The lust for power is a lust that will eventually lead you to corruption. You got to look for the people that don't want power, that just are doing something because it's the right thing to do. The folks like the guy in charge of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe. He probably lives a very pedestrian life. He doesn't really have, you know, I've seen him on interviews and stuff, and yeah, he's got an ego, but he's all about his mission. And he's not doing it for power. He's not going to change his message to please anybody. He's doing what he's doing. He's taking what donations he can. And his mission is to expose corruption at all levels, of all kinds, through the use of whistleblowers and legal means. And I think that is one of the Project Veritas is one of God's missions. Be it non-denominational at all. This is what God is really all about. The operation of that organization is more holy than any Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever organization I know of. It's dedicated to truth and to exposing the abuse of power. And they are blessed. That is a blessed organization. Those are the kind of folks that are going to be left in humanity when this is done in the prime universe, in God's universe. They're going to be continuing this battle, driving Borg out so this universe can be the universe of creativity, of friendly competition, friendly argument. We're not going to get offended at everything that everybody else says. We're going to accept it and say, okay, well, I disagree, and this is why. We're going to be able to laugh when we call each other names and not take it as a personal slur. We're going to be able to have a rational argument with each other about something. And if we don't come up with a solution, say, well, we'll have to agree to disagree. But I'm going to vote for this guy's plan or this plan, and I'm going to donate and advocate for that because that's what I believe in. And when plans are approved, they're going to be done in an experimental way. No matter what the situation, we're not just going to take some new poorly tested product from some big pharma corporation and give it to the whole country willy-nilly. We're going to require that it's properly tested, that the tests are thoroughly reviewed by impartial scientists. Those tests are done with large enough population sizes and for a large enough time that there is no possibility of major side effects, especially side effects that don't emerge immediately, that may take 2 weeks, 6 months, years to manifest themselves. This is the difference between a vaccine like the polio vaccine and some of the shady products that are being developed today. This is the difference between foods that are proven wholesome and healthy for consumption and ones that have horrible side effects which are never tested for, let alone those tests approved by any body that actually works like the FDA should. Okay, we're not doing it right. That doesn't mean we need to stop doing science. This is bad science. These people know better. They are tyrants. They are spiritual bypassers. They want the easy path to what they see is as success, which to them is notoriety, popularity, influence, money, power. That may seem like success in this material world, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that is not what success looks like in the afterlife. This is not what success looks like in heaven. in the heavens that you really want to attend. It might be what success looks like briefly in a hell until whatever you're doing in that hell isn't producing enough spiritual energy to please your overlord, and they crank up the notch a little bit by throwing some dark stuff into your virtual reality. This is how the Matrix universes work like. Somebody else is controlling everything, making you experience everything. This is not how God's universe works. This is why everybody wants to play in this universe, because you enjoy more freedom here. You experience a realer virtual reality than the souls in any other universe. This is where it's real, and it's getting more real all the time as we drive these Borgsters out of our universe. It's going to take a long time. Day 7 is just the completion of testing on this planet. Day 8, we're going to have to go retake the galaxy. That's going to take a long time. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be back and forth, battles won, battles lost, new things invented, new technologies tried, alliances shift, etc., etc. There will be maybe some more forgetting because we still have reincarnation amnesia. And if you want to play the game, you have to deal with that. You have a certain amount of influence to play from the spiritual world, but that ability to influence what's going on in the physical world is diminishing as this new law spreads. Those souls who will try to interfere as they did before are going to get sucked into reincarnation and karma. What are some of the laws you have to deal with there? Well, when you come and take a physical presence, you incarnate, you accept the rules of that soul vehicle. Lifetime limitations, likely susceptibilities to disease, the filtering of the sensory process that makes you susceptible to other souls that aren't subject to those same restrictions. This is why incarnation is limited. This is why there's so little you can't do as a human being. It's not because somebody deprived you of your right to have all these powers and everything. Oh, we just need to go find the Syrinxers of the pyramids and then we can be Superman again. I'm sorry, no, that's not the way it works, folks. This is cult speaking. The I want to go back to the golden age is a cult. It's a cult idea that is encouraged by the adversary because it creates conflict. It makes everybody mad at progress. It makes everybody think that any progress is bad progress. They lump the bad vaccines in with the good vaccines and say, I'm anti-vax. That's just as bad a position as being pro-vax. If vaccines were what they mean, the word vaccine means that it's a drug that keeps you from getting a disease that doesn't produce worse diseases than the one that it's preventing. That's a vaccine. That's what we call the vaccine. That's how the definition read until they redefined it in recent dictionaries. And there are good vaccines. There have been good vaccines. The polio vaccine was tested for, I think, close to 20 years, very carefully, very meticulously, by responsible scientists who put karma first over personal gain, over their getting the Nobel Prize. Because back in those days, if somebody was exposed as a fraud, they were ostracized from the community. Now, anybody who exposes a fraud is ostracized from commercial media. from public sphere. We've gone 180 degrees backwards spiritually in the last roughly 100 years, maybe a little bit more, since the postmodernist era of God is dead, we are God. The humanist era. Humanism is not a great religion. It says humanity is the center of everything. We are a chosen species, but that's not reason to think we're better than anybody else. A lot more engineering has gone into this species than almost any other, but each was created for their own reasons, and humanity is the sum of all the creations before that. We contain elements of the genes of pretty much every creature that has ever existed. Ones that we aren't even aware of, ones that we haven't even found in the fossil record to give names to. We are an evolved creation. And we should be thankful for everything that happened to get us to the point we are. And to give us the chance to do what we will in future lives. If you let it go to your head, if you think, yeah, humans are the best thing ever, we need to go kill all those other aliens, and this is an agenda that's being set up. You're being set up for. There are some that are going to be our friends. There are some that are going to be our enemies. There are some that are on both sides, like we are, who are confused. They all need to be woken up. And it's a 12-step process. This is the wonderful thing about the idea of the 12-step. It really mirrors the system that's been developed by the gods, by the first creator and the team of gods that sees the value of the divine plan. Anyway, I hope that was useful. I think I'm about ready to call it quits. My wife and child are off at my wife's best friends having New Year's celebration, so that's why I'm getting such a long time to have this podcast, but I'm probably talked too long and nobody's listening at this point, but I hope you found it useful, interesting. Like, share, subscribe. Tune in again to the Omnist Hour. Till next time, this is Rob Trump. Happy Karma.